What's up everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Mike Verspril, and the time-lapse footage that you just saw was taken with this lens right here, the new Nikon 20mm 1.8s lens, which is for the Nikon Z cameras. Today I want to jump onto the computer and show you guys some images I took from last week of the Milky Way galaxy. Now before I do that, let's just take a closer look at this new lens. As we can see, this is larger than my other Z mount lenses, however the weight is still comparable at 1.11 pounds. It has a 77mm filter thread, 9 rounded blades, and is really sharp corner to corner, which it better be for a $1,000 lens. Now I don't own the 20mm 1.8G lens, but Richie Talks does a great comparison video between the two, so definitely check his video out. I'll leave that link down below. My video is going to be focused on real world samples that I took of the Milky Way galaxy. I'm also going to show you guys some tips and tricks on how to get sharper and cleaner night images. So let's jump onto the computer. Alright, so here we are on the computer side of things, and I'm going to run through some photos of the Milky Way and a couple non-Milky Way photos as well, just to give you guys an idea of this lens and how well it performs at night. So this first shot right here is in Virginia, and I found a piece of driftwood, and there's a decent amount of light pollution in the sky, but I was still able to capture the Milky Way. So let's zoom in here 1:1, and we can see the stars. Let's go 2:1. You can see at 1.8, this was taken ISO 5000 and a shutter speed of 13 seconds. And there's a little bit of coma, but it's not too bad. I've seen a lot of lenses at 1.8 and the coma is extremely bad. Now there is a heavy vignette that happens at 1.8 with this lens, but that's to be expected. Most lenses that are 1.4, 1.8, even 2.8 have a decent amount of vignetting. But this handles coma really well. Let's go 1:1. I'm really impressed with this lens so far. And typically I don't like to shoot wide open. I like to stop down my lenses just a little bit to bring back some corner to corner sharpness. But even at 1.8, this is really good. So next shot right here was taken at f2. And let that load in. And we can go 2:1. And you can see it's starting to get a hair sharper. And the coma is starting to reduce a little bit. But yeah, it's even sharper than 1.8. And I could compare the two lenses for us. Whoops. At 1:1, it's hard to tell which picture is which. I just know this is a little bit darker because this is at f2. And let's go to 2:1. And you can see the stars are just a tad sharper at f2. And they should increase sharpness as we stop down a little bit further. But at 1.8, it's still very usable in my opinion. Let's close this out. Alright, so this shot is f2.2. And again, it's just getting a little bit sharper and a little less coma. There's 2.5. And the stars look really good corner to corner. So as we zoom down here, you can see the driftwood's a little soft. And that's because I was around 15 feet away from this piece of driftwood, so I probably have to go a little bit further for it to be a little bit sharper, but that's okay. I took a separate exposure for my foreground, and I recommend you doing that in general, just for a sharper, cleaner image, and I'll show you guys exactly what I mean. So right here I have a series of photos that I took at f2.2, 13 seconds, and ISO 5000, and I think I took about 10 of them. All consecutively, one after another. If you're wondering what this is back here, this is actually lightning. There was a thunderstorm going on, so that was pretty cool. That was in the background going off. And then once I took those exposures, I did a really long exposure for the foreground, and this I took at f5.6, and my shutter speed was 126 seconds, and the ISO was 1600. I had to increase the exposure a little bit. It was a little bit underexposed, and I decreased the contrast a little bit. I'll show you guys why. It was because it was a little dark. So lower the contrast and increase my exposure. But you can see the foreground is really clean and sharp. Look how sharp the driftwood is now. and I didn't change anything other than the f-stop. I didn't refocus or anything like that. I just stopped it down to 5.6, and that made this whole foreground nice and sharp. Now with my stacked images and this foreground, I blended the two and created this photo right here, which is sharp all over and nice and clean. So I have tutorials on how to create images like that using Starry Landscape Stacker or Sequator, and then taking an additional photo for your foreground to increase the sharpness and cleanliness of your foreground, and then blending the two together. I'll leave those linked down below as well. So moving on, let's take another look at some more photos. Same thing, I shot this at 1.8, but this time it was a 10-second shutter speed instead of 13. And this is at ISO 5000, and all these photos I've been showing you were taken with the Z7 so far. Again, I'm really impressed at 1.8. I mean, look how sharp these stars are. You know, they get a little soft towards the corners, but really not that bad compared to some lenses I've used in the past. If we stop this down, we'll see the same results as the other one, where they start to get slightly sharper corner to corner, and it should help with the vignetting a little bit too. And here's 2.8 for those that are wondering. And we could compare that to the 1.8. So you can see, you know, 2.8 is definitely sharper in the corners, and a little bit less coma in the stars in the corners as well. And you might be wondering, why would you stop this lens down at all if it's so impressive at 1.8? And you know, that's just personal preference. Some people want it extremely sharp corner to corner, and if you're using a star tracker, you could stop it down. You could get away with that. And if there's a lot of light pollution in the area, you could also stop down a little bit and cut some of that light out. So there are certain scenarios where you might want to stop down, and some of it's personal preference as well on just, you know, how sharp you want your images. So let's close this out. So here are some daytime images I want to show you guys. This is the 20mm lens. This is at 14 with the 14-30. This is at 20mm with the 14-30. And then this is with the 15mm Laowa. Some people might be torn between the 20mm 1.8 versus the Laowa f2. Now the Laowa f2 is very good. It's a little soft wide open at f2. I like to stop that down to at least f2.2 or f2.8. But it does a really good job for what it is. And for me, the Laowa lens is a really good time-lapse lens because it allows me to get a lot of the foreground and the sky into one scene, because when you do a time-lapse and you edit in the end, you have to clip a lot of the image from the top or the bottom, or a little bit of both. So I like to get as much of it as possible. So I like to have that 15mm wide lens. And with the 20mm, you can see it punches in a little bit. So doing a time lapse and capturing a decent amount of foreground with the sky, it's a little limiting in my opinion. So I like having that ultra wide lens. So if you're in that boat where you plan on doing time lapses, then you might want to look towards the 15mm Laowa. And I'll give you an aperture that's nice and open, so you could gather in more light when doing Milky Way time lapses. Typically a prime lens is going to be sharper than a zoom lens, and that's what I found here with my test results photographing the 20mm versus 14-30 f4. If I stop the 20mm down to f4, I mean, it's really sharp corner to corner compared to my 14-30. If I zoom that into 20mm, let's compare those two. You'll see that at f4 with the Nikon 14-30, it's slightly softer when we get to the sides. At 1:1, they're pretty close. You might see a slight difference. As we zoom in more, you can see the 20mm is definitely a little bit sharper than my 14-30 at 20mm. At 14mm, my f4 is extremely sharp, probably sharper than it is at 20mm. So it's definitely no slouch, but the prime lens is typically going to be sharper than any type of zoom lens you have. And here we can see the difference in field of view with the 20mm lens versus the 15mm Laowa. And if we zoom in, both of these were shot at f2, and 1:1 they look pretty sharp. But if we zoom a little further, the 20mm definitely beats the Laowa. You can see these trees look a little smeared with the Laowa lens. That's why I like to stop the Laowa down a little bit and not shoot it wide open. Continuing to move on, here is a Vertorama that I took with my Nikon Z6 and the 20mm lens. This was taken at f2.2, ISO 6400, shutter speed of 10 seconds, and this was at McKay Island in North Carolina. Really cool spot. You can zoom in here, you can see how sharp it is, and I was able to catch some reflections in the still water here. But yeah, it's such a really awesome place to visit. It's my first time going there, and I don't think anybody else has gotten this shot yet. So I was very happy to capture this, and the new lens did a fantastic job. Here's another one with the Milky Way. And this is at 2:1. At 1:1, you can see just really sharp, great detail. Same thing, f2, ISO 6400, shutter speed 13 seconds. Just did a fantastic job. This is not a panorama. I took this in portrait orientation. This is at f2, shutter speed of 10 seconds, ISO 6400. As you can see, again, nice and sharp. At f2, a little bit of coma, a little softer in the corners, but not terrible. I think f2 is probably going to be my go-to number with this lens. You know, 1.8 is good, but I could bring a little bit of sharpness back at f2 or f2.2. But even in the middle here, you can see how sharp these trees are at f2. It does a great job. So this is the last photo I'm going to show you guys. This is a sunrise at the beach, and I shot this at f13. And I want to show you guys this picture because some people like to see how well lenses create a sun star, and this one's okay. It's nothing really impressive that I've seen from other lenses, but it does an okay job. I think the older Nikon 20mm 1.8G lens does a better job than this lens, but it is what it is. I still like this lens a lot. I mean, you can see how sharp it is. It's such a great lens for the Z cameras, and I really like the focal length on this. It's probably going to be my go-to lens when doing still images of the Milky Way. And then, like I said, I like to use a little bit wider lens, like my 15mm Laowa, to do my time-lapse work. But I mean, this thing still does great time lapses. It's just going to be a little bit more punched in to the sky and the foreground, so you just kind of have to balance that a little bit differently than you would with the ultra wide lens. So that's just something to take note of. Also, just another quick tip before you go: if you're having trouble finding infinity with your Nikon Z lenses, you can turn off your camera and turn it back on, and it will automatically set it to infinity even if you have your lenses switched to manual focus. I tested this out with this new Nikon 20mm lens, and I also tested it out with my 14-30 f4 lens, which it worked for both of those. So that's a cool trick, and it comes in real handy when you're working in the dark. Alright guys, so I'm going to wrap this up. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. Definitely check out my affiliate links. It really helps my channel grow, and I hope everybody stays safe and happy shooting. Bye.